Unity Certified Associate 2026. Hello future game developers. Imagine holding that official Unity certificate in your hands. It feels good, right? But looking at all those topics can feel scary. Well, don't worry. We are going to break this down, piece by piece, so you can walk into that exam room feeling ready and confident. Now, this video is just one part of the journey. If you want the full experience, you can find the link in the description below. I have a complete set of practice questions with clear explanations that will really help you get your certification. Also, if you learn better by doing, check out my Udemy practice test for a real exam feel, or grab my visual practice test on Etsy if you like learning with pictures. Okay, let's get to work. Section 1. Animation and Cinematics Lecture Script, Concept Review. So, let's talk about making things move. In Unity, animation is not just about moving a character from point A to point B. It is a system. When you take the exam, they will ask you a lot about the animator controller. Think of this as the brain of your character. It decides when to run, jump, or sit idle. Inside this controller, we have things called states. A state is just a specific animation, like run or jump. But how does the game know when to switch from running to jumping? That is where transitions come in. A transition is the line that connects two states. But you cannot just have a line. You need a rule. We call these rules conditions. To make a condition work, we use parameters. Think of a parameter like a switch or a dial. We have a few types. A float is a number with decimals, useful for speed. An int is a whole number. A bool is just true or false, like, is jumping. And a trigger is like a button you press once, and it resets immediately. Visual showing the inspector window. Now, look at the inspector. When you click on an animation clip, you see options. One big one is loop time. If you want your character to keep breathing or running without stopping, you must check this box. If you don't, the animation plays once and freezes. Let's look at keyframes. When you open the animation window, you see a timeline. You set a start point and an end point. Unity does the math for the middle part. This is called interpolation. It saves you time so you don't have to draw every single frame. Another big topic is inverse kinematics, or IK. This sounds hard, but it is simple. Imagine you want your character to pick up an apple. Normally, you rotate the shoulder, then the elbow, then the hand. Forward kinematics. But with IK, you just move the hand to the apple, and Unity figures out where the elbow and shoulder should go. It is great for feet placement on uneven ground too. Visual showing the timeline window. Finally, for cutscenes, we use the timeline. This tool lets you control animations, audio, and cameras all at once. It is like a video editor inside Unity. You can mix different animation clips on a single track to make smooth movements. Keep these terms in your head: animator controller, transitions, parameters, loop time, and IK. You will see them in the questions below. Practice questions, Section 1, 1. You want your character to switch from walking to running when the speed is greater than 5. Which parameter type should you use? Answer: float. 2. So a float is the best choice for checking speed values. 2. Your character plays the run animation once and then stops moving. What setting did you likely forget to check? Answer: loop time. Explanation: loop time makes the animation repeat over and over. Without it, the clip plays one time and ends. 3. Which component must be attached to a game object to use the animator controller? Answer: animator component. Explanation: the animator component is the box that holds the controller. Without this component on your object, the animations will not work. 4. You want to make a transition happen instantly without waiting for the current animation to finish. What setting do you uncheck? Answer: has exit time. Explanation: has exit time forces the current animation to finish before switching. Unchecking it allows an instant switch, which is good for jumping or getting hit. 5. What tool allows you to sequence audio, animations, and camera shots for a cinematic cutscene? Filled circle. Explanation: the timeline window is built specifically for sequencing multiple tracks of time-based events like cutscenes. 6. You want your character's feet to adjust automatically to stand on stairs. What system should you use? Answer: inverse kinematics, IK. Explanation: IK calculates the joint positions based on where the end effector, the foot, needs to be, making it perfect for uneven ground. 7. In the animator window, what do you call the box that represents a specific animation clip like idle? Answer: state. Explanation: each node or box in the animator graph is called a state. It holds the animation clip. 8. You have a die animation that should only happen once. Which parameter type acts like a button press that resets automatically? Answer: trigger. Explanation: a trigger is useful for one-time events like attacking or dying because it consumes the event and then turns off. 9. What feature allows you to blend two animations, like running and turning, based on coordinate values? Answer: blend tree. Explanation: blend trees combine multiple animations smoothly based on parameters, allowing for natural movement like running diagonally. 10. You modified an animation clip but want to revert to the original. Where are the keyframes stored? Answer: the animation clip asset. Anim file, the clip, not in the controller or the scene. 11. Which window allows you to manually record keyframes by moving the object in the scene? Answer: animation window. Explanation: the animation window has a record button, red circle, that lets you move objects and automatically saves those positions as keyframes. 12. When importing a humanoid character, what must you configure to ensure the bones map correctly? Answer: the avatar, rig. Explanation: setting the rig type to humanoid and configuring the avatar ensures Unity understands which bone is the arm, leg, head, etc. 13. What is the default state in an animator controller usually colored? Answer: orange. Explanation: the entry state, default state, turns orange to show it is the first thing that plays when the game starts. 14. You want to smooth out the switch between walk and run so it doesn't snap. What do you adjust in the transition? Answer: transition duration or blend duration. Explanation: this setting controls how long the two animations overlap, creating a smooth crossfade effect. 15. If an object needs to follow a path exactly for a cutscene, which track type in timeline is best? Answer: animation track. Explanation: you can animate the position of the game object directly on an animation track within the timeline. Section 2. Asset Management and Scene Handling Lecture Script, Concept Review. Alright, moving on to Section 2. This is all about how you handle your stuff. In Unity, stuff means assets. Assets are your sounds, models, textures, and scripts. The biggest, most helpful thing you need to know for the exam is the prefab. Listen to me closely here. A prefab is like a blueprint or a cookie cutter. If you create a zombie prefab, you can drag it into your scene 10 times to make 10 zombies. Now, here is the magic. If you change the color of the prefab to green, all 10 zombies turn green instantly. This saves you so much time. Visual showing the hierarchy turned blue. You will notice in the hierarchy that prefabs are blue. If you change just one zombie in the scene, that is called an instance override. From the blueprint, you can either revert it back to match the others, or click Apply to save that change to the main blueprint, which changes everyone else too. Now, let's talk about importing. When you bring a 3D model into Unity, usually as an FBX file, you have settings in the inspector. You can adjust the scale factor. If your model looks tiny or huge, check the scale factor. You also have to check Read, Write enabled if you plan to modify the mesh with code, but be careful, as this uses more memory. Visual showing materials and shaders. Next up are materials and shaders. A material is the paint. A shader is the math that tells the paint how to look. Is it shiny? Is it transparent? Is it metallic? The standard shader is the default one you will use most. It has settings for albedo, the base color, metallic, and smoothness. If you want glass, you change the rendering mode to transparent. Let's briefly touch on packages. Unity has a package manager. This is where you download extra tools, like Pro Builder or Cinemachine. It keeps your project clean because you only install what you need. Lastly, scenes. A game is made of many scenes: menu, level 1, level 2. You must add these scenes to the build settings window if you want them to be in the final game. If a scene is not in that list, the game cannot load it. Got it? Prefabs, import settings, materials, package manager, and build settings. Let's test your knowledge. Practice questions, Section 2, 1. You created a prefab for a coin. You want to change the color of every coin in the game to gold. Where do you make this change? Answer: the prefab asset, in the project window. Explanation: changing the main prefab asset automatically updates all instances of that coin in all scenes. 2. In the hierarchy, you see a game object text is blue. What does this mean? Answer: it is a prefab instance. Explanation: Unity colors prefab instances blue to help you distinguish them from regular game objects. 3. You dragged a 3D model into Unity, but it is huge compared to your character. What setting in the import settings should you adjust? Answer: scale factor. Explanation: the scale factor allows you to normalize the size of imported models to match Unity's unit system, usually 1 unit equals 1 meter. 4. Which rendering mode in the standard shader should you use for a glass window? Answer: transparent. Explanation: the transparent mode calculates alpha values, allowing you to see through the object, which is needed for glass or water. 5. You try to load Level 2 using code, but you get an error saying the scene cannot be found. What did you forget? Answer: add the scene to the build settings. Explanation: only scenes listed in the Scenes in Build list inside build settings can be loaded during gameplay. 6. What happens if you click Unpack Prefab on an object in the hierarchy? Answer: it becomes a regular game object. Explanation: unpacking breaks the link to the blueprint. It will no longer receive updates if you change the original prefab. 7. You want to install a Unity feature like Cinemachine or Pro Builder. Where do you go? Answer: Package Manager. Explanation: the Package Manager is the central hub for installing, upgrading, and removing Unity-made features and third-party assets. 8. What texture map controls how bumpy or textured a surface looks without adding more geometry? Answer: normal map. Explanation: a normal map simulates lighting details to make a flat surface look like it has bumps, cracks, or depth. 9. You modified a prefab instance in the scene, added a hat. How do you make sure all other prefabs also get this hat? Answer: click Overrides, and then Apply All. Explanation: applying the override pushes your local changes back to the main prefab asset, updating everything else. 10. What is the standard file format for 3D models imported into Unity? OBJ. Explanation: FBX is the most common and versatile format that supports models, animations, and rigs. 11. You want to create a new folder structure to organize your sounds. In which window do you do this? Answer: Project window. Explanation: the project window shows your actual files and folders on your computer's hard drive. 12. What property in the standard shader controls how, mirror-like, a surface reflects the environment? Answer: smoothness. Explanation: high smoothness makes a surface reflect clearly, like a mirror, while low smoothness makes it dull, like rubber. 13. Can you nest a prefab inside another prefab? Answer: yes, nested prefabs. Explanation: Unity allows nested prefabs, meaning you can have a sword prefab inside a character prefab. 14. Where do you find the setting to change the game between 2D and 3D mode in the editor? Answer: the Scene View control bar, or editor settings. Explanation: there is a 2D toggle button in the scene view that changes the camera to orthographic and hides 3D gizmos. 15. What component renders the actual mesh geometry on the screen? Answer: Mesh Renderer. Explanation: the mesh filter holds the shape, but the mesh renderer takes that shape and paints the material on it so you can see it. Section 3. C# Programming Basics for Unity Lecture Script, Concept Review. Okay, take a deep breath. We are going into coding. I know this scares some people, but for the associate exam, you just need the basics. You don't need to be a wizard. Scripts in Unity are usually written in C#. When you create a script, it inherits from mono behavior. Let's look at the two most famous methods, start and update. Void start runs exactly one time. It happens when the object first comes into the game. This is where you set things up, like getting health or finding a weapon. Void update runs every single frame. If your game runs at 60 frames per second, update runs 60 times a second. This is where you check for inputs, like pressing spacebar, or move characters. Visual showing variables. You need to know your variables. Public means you can see it in the Unity inspector. Private means it is hidden and only this script can touch it. If you want a variable to be private, but still show up in the inspector, you use a special tag called serialize field. The exam loves to ask about that. Now, collision. How do we know if we hit something? We have on collision enter. This is for solid physics crashes, like a car hitting a wall. Both objects need a collider, and at least one needs a rigid body, which adds gravity. Then we have on trigger enter. This is for ghosts or coins. You walk through it, and it triggers an event. For this to work, you must check the is trigger box on the collider. Visual showing input, finally, input. Get axis, horizontal. This gives you a value between -1 and 1. Left is -1, right is 1, and not touching anything is 0. It is great for smooth movement. Delta time. Delta time. This makes sure your game runs at the same speed on a fast computer and a slow computer. Check your brackets, and don't forget the semicolon at the end of the line. Practice questions, Section 3, 1. Which method runs once per frame? Answer: update. Explanation: update is called every frame and is used for logic that needs constant checking, like movement or input. 2. You want a variable to be editable in the inspector, but you want other scripts to be unable to change it. How do you write it? Answer: serialize field, private int my var. Explanation: serialize field forces Unity to draw the private variable in the inspector window without making it public to other code. 3. What component is required to make a game object react to gravity? Answer: rigid body. Explanation: the rigid body component adds physics simulation, including gravity and mass, to an object. 4. You wrote a script, but it is not doing anything in the game. What simple step did you miss? Answer: attaching the script to a game object. Explanation: a script is just a text file until it is added as a component to an active game object in the scene. 5. Which method is automatically called when a game object with a collider touches another collider, physics collision? Answer: on collision enter. Explanation: on collision enter detects physical impacts where objects bounce or stop against each other. 6. To check if the player pushed the jump button, which line of code is correct? Get button down, jump. Explanation: get button down returns true only on the specific frame the button was pressed, which prevents infinite jumping. 7. Delta time. Answer: to make movement frame rate independent. Explanation: it converts movement per frame to movement per second, ensuring the speed is consistent regardless of how fast the computer is. 8. What does destroy game object 5F do? Filled circle answer: destroys the object after a 5-second delay. Filled circle explanation: the destroy function takes an optional second argument for time delay. 9. You want to access the transform component of the object the script is attached to. What keyword do you use? Answer: transform, lowercase t. Explanation: the keyword transform is a direct reference to the transform component attached to the current game object. 10. Which function is used to print messages to the console for debugging? Log sends text to the console window, which is vital for finding errors or checking values. 11. If you check, is trigger, on a collider, what happens? Answer. Objects pass through it, and it calls on trigger enter. Explanation. It stops being a solid wall and becomes a zone that detects entries, useful for collecting coins or entering doors. 12. How do you find a game object named player using code? Find player. Explanation. This searches the active scene for an object with that exact name. It is slow, so don't use it in update. 13. What is the base class that all Unity scripts must inherit from to work on game objects? Answer. Mono behavior. Explanation. When you create a new C# script in Unity, it automatically puts mono behavior after the class name. 14. You want to store a sentence of text. Which variable type do you use? Answer. String. Explanation. In C#, text is stored in string variables, enclosed in double quotes. 15. What does the awake method do? Answer. It runs once, before start, when the script instance is being loaded. Explanation. Awake is used to initialize variables before the game even begins, and it runs even if the script component is disabled, as long as the object is active. Section 4. Lighting and Rendering Lecture Script, Concept Review. Welcome back. In Section 4, we are going to talk about lighting. Lighting makes your game look real. Without it, everything is just flat and boring. First, let's meet the lights. The most important one is the directional light. Think of this as the sun. It is infinite and far away. It lights up the whole scene evenly. It does not matter where you put it, only how you rotate it. Then, we have the point light. This is like a light bulb or a fire. It starts at one point and fades out as it goes further. We also have the spotlight, which is like a flashlight or a stage light. It shoots a cone of light in one direction. Visual showing light mode options. Now, look at the mode on your light. You will see real-time, mixed, and baked. Real-time lights calculate shadows and brightness every single frame. They look great but cost a lot of computer power. Baked lights are different. When you bake lighting, Unity calculates all the shadows and light bounces before the game starts. It saves this as a texture called a light map. It is super fast for the game to run, but you cannot move the lights or objects afterwards. Mixed is a mix of both. It gives you good shadows on moving characters but keeps the static world cheap to render. Let's talk about the skybox. This is the background of your world. It is a big material that wraps around the entire scene. If you want to change the day to night, you change the skybox material in the lighting window. Next is post-processing. This is like adding an Instagram filter to your game. You add a volume component. You can add effects like bloom, which makes bright lights glow, color grading, to change the mood, or vignette, dark corners. It makes a huge difference. Finally, cameras. The camera is the player's eye. You have perspective and orthographic. Perspective is like real life. Things get smaller when they are far away. Orthographic is flat. Things stay the same size no matter how far they are. We use orthographic mostly for 2D games. Also, keep an eye on occlusion culling. This is a big word, but it is simple. If a building is blocking a car, why draw the car? Occlusion culling tells Unity not to render things that the camera cannot see. It saves a lot of performance. Remember, directional light is the sun. Baked means pre-calculated. Post-processing is filters. And occlusion culling hides hidden stuff. Practice questions, Section 4, 1. Which light type mimics the sun and affects the entire scene regardless of position? Answer: directional light. Explanation: a directional light simulates a distant light source like the sun, emitting parallel rays everywhere. 2. You want to make a lamp that lights up a small area around it. Which light type do you use? Answer: point light. Explanation: point lights emit light in all directions from a specific spot, fading out over distance, perfect for lamps or fires. 3. What is the process called where Unity calculates static lighting and shadows and saves them as textures? Answer: light baking. Explanation: baking cooks the lighting information into texture maps, light maps, so the computer doesn't have to calculate it every frame. 4. You have a night scene but the background is still bright blue. What do you need to change? Answer: the skybox material. Explanation: the skybox controls the environmental background. Changing its material changes the sky from day to night. 5. Which camera projection mode keeps objects the same size regardless of distance, often used for 2D games? Answer: orthographic. Explanation: orthographic projection removes perspective distortion, making it ideal for 2D, UI, or architectural views. 6. What feature allows you to add effects like bloom, vignette, and color grading? Answer: post-processing volume. Explanation: the post-processing stack uses volumes to apply full screen filters and effects to the camera's view. 7. Why would you use occlusion culling? Answer: to improve performance by not rendering objects hidden behind other objects. Explanation: it stops the GPU from wasting time drawing things the camera cannot see, like furniture inside a house when you are outside. 8. What is a light map? Answer: a texture that stores pre-calculated lighting data. Explanation: light maps are the result of baking. They are wrapped onto objects to show light and shadow without real-time calculation. 9. You want a flashlight effect. Which light component is best? Answer: spotlight. Explanation: a spotlight projects a cone of light in a specific direction, exactly like a flashlight or car headlight. 10. In the lighting window, what does ambient color control? Answer: the general light that fills the shadows. Explanation: ambient light ensures that even areas in shadow are not pitch black, simulating light scattering from the sky. 11. Which rendering path is generally faster for mobile devices? Answer: forward rendering. Explanation: forward rendering is simpler and calculates lights per object, making it lighter on mobile processes compared to deferred rendering. 12. You want a shiny metal object to reflect the environment. What do you need in the scene? Answer: reflection probe. Explanation: A reflection probe captures a picture of the surroundings and applies it to shiny objects to simulate realistic reflections. 13. What happens if you mark a game object as static in the inspector? Answer: Unity knows it won't move, so it can include it in light baking and occlusion culling. Explanation: the static checkbox is the signal to Unity that it can pre-calculate heavy math for this object. 14. What visual effect simulates the eye adjusting to bright light, often creating a glow? Answer: bloom. Explanation: bloom creates fringes of light extending from the borders of bright areas, giving the illusion of overwhelming brightness. 15. If your shadows look pixelated or blocky, what setting should you check on the light component? Answer: shadow resolution. Explanation: increasing the shadow resolution allocates more pixels to the shadow map, making the edges smoother. Lecture script, concept review. Let's get moving with section 5, physics and 2D. Physics in Unity is split into two worlds. You have 3D physics, PhysX, and 2D physics, Box 2D. They are separate systems. You cannot mix them. A rigid body works with 3D colliders. A rigid body 2D works only with 2D colliders. If you mix them, nothing happens. The exam will try to trick you with this. Let's talk about colliders. A collider is the shape of the object for physics. A box collider is a square. A sphere collider is a ball. A mesh collider is the exact shape of the model, but it is expensive to run. Use simple shapes whenever you can. To make things bounce or slide, we use physics materials. In 3D, it is physics material. In 2D, it is physics material 2D. You can change friction, how slippery it is, and bounciness, how much it rebounds. Now, raycasting. Imagine a laser pointer. You shoot an invisible line from your gun or your eyes. If it hits something, it tells you what it hit. We use this for shooting bullets, detecting the ground, or opening doors. Raycast. Let's switch to 2D. In 2D, we don't use 3D models. We use sprites. A sprite is just a 2D image. When you put a sprite in the scene, it has a sprite renderer. The most important setting here is the sorting layer. If your character is walking behind a tree, but should be in front, you change the sorting layer or the order in layer number. Higher numbers are drawn on top. Finally, the sprite editor. Sometimes you have one image with many characters on it, a sprite sheet. You use the sprite editor to slice it into separate images. You can do this automatically or manually. Remember, rigid body adds gravity. Colliders give shape. Physics materials add bounce. Raycast is a laser. And sorting layers decide who is in front. Practice questions, section 5, 1. You added a rigid body to your character, but it falls through the floor. What is missing? Answer: a collider component on the floor, or the character. Explanation: physics interactions require both objects to have colliders. Without them, they are just ghosts passing through each other. 2. Which component is required for 2D physics interactions like gravity? Answer: rigid body 2D. Explanation: for 2D games, you must use the 2D version of the components. A normal rigid body will not work with 2D colliders. 3. You want a ball to bounce when it hits the ground. What do you create? Answer: a physics material, or physics material 2D. 8. And drag it into the collider's material slot. 4. What method do you use to detect if a player is looking at an object? Raycast. Explanation: Raycasting shoots an invisible line to see if it intersects with any colliders, acting like a line of sight check. 5. In a 2D game, your character is appearing behind the background. What do you adjust? Answer: sorting layer or order in layer. Explanation: the sprite renderer uses these settings to determine draw order. Higher numbers or layers lower in the list drawer on top. 6. Which collider type is the most computationally expensive, slowest? Answer: mesh collider. Explanation: mesh colliders use the complex geometry of the model itself. Box, sphere, and capsule colliders are simple math and much faster. 7. You have a single image with multiple character poses. How do you separate them? Answer: use the sprite editor to slice the image. Explanation: the slice function in the sprite editor cuts a sprite sheet into individual sprites that you can use separately. 8. What does is kinematic do on a rigid body? Answer: it stops physics forces, like gravity, collisions, from moving the object. Explanation: kinematic objects are moved by code or animation only. They push other objects but don't get pushed back. 9. You want to simulate ice. What property do you change in the physics material? Answer: friction. Explanation: lowering the friction to near zero makes the surface slippery, allowing objects to slide easily. 10. Which axis is usually ignored or locked in 2D physics? Answer: the z-axis. Explanation: 2D games operate on x, horizontal, and y, vertical. The z-axis, depth, is locked to prevent objects from falling away from the screen. 11. What component renders a 2D image in the scene? Answer: sprite renderer. Explanation: just as a mesh renderer draws 3D models, the sprite renderer draws 2D images. 12. Can a circle collider 2D interact with a box collider 3D? Answer: no. Explanation: the 2D and 3D physics engines are completely separate. They cannot see or touch each other. 13. What tool helps you visually edit the shape of a 2D collider? Answer: the Edit Collider button in the inspector. Explanation: this button lets you drag green handles in the scene view to resize the collider to match your sprite. 14. You want to make a platform that moves up and down but still carries the player. What rigid body setting is best? Answer: is kinematic equals true. Explanation: a kinematic body can move and carry things, but won't fall due to gravity or be knocked off course by the player. 15. How do you define the boundaries of a 2D level so the player doesn't walk off screen? Filled circle. Answer: add edge colliders or box colliders around the perimeter. Filled circle. Explanation: invisible static colliders act as walls to keep the physics objects inside the play area. Section 6. UI, Audio, and Navigation Lecture Script, Concept Review. You made it to the final section. Section 6. UI, Audio, and Navigation. This is about polishing the user experience. First, UI, User Interface. Everything UI lives inside a canvas. Think of the canvas as a sheet of glass over your camera. The most confusing part is the render mode. Screen space, overlay, the UI sits on top of everything. It doesn't care about the camera. This is for health bars and pause menus. World space, the UI is an object in the game world, like a floating name tag above a player's head. Then we have anchors. Anchors are crucial. They tell the button where to stick. If you anchor a button to the top right, it stays in the top right, even if you resize the window or play on a phone. If you don't use anchors, your UI will look broken on different screens. Now, audio. To hear sound, you need two things. 1. An audio listener. This is the ear. It is usually on the main camera. You only need one in the scene. 2. An audio source. This is the speaker. It plays the sound clip. If you want to control volume for music and sound effects separately, you use an audio mixer. It lets you group sounds and add effects like echo. Finally, navigation, NavMesh. This is how I walks around. You mark your floor objects as navigation static. Then you go to the navigation window and click Bake. Unity draws a blue mesh on the floor. This is the NavMesh, walkable area. To make a character walk on it, you give them a NavMesh agent component. You tell the agent, go to this point, and it finds the path automatically, avoiding walls. And that is it. UI needs a canvas. Audio needs a listener and source. AI needs a NavMesh. Practice questions, Section 6, 1. Which component acts as the ear in the scene and is usually attached to the camera? Answer: audio listener. Explanation: the audio listener picks up sounds from audio sources. Without it, the game is silent. 2. You want a button to always stay in the bottom right corner, regardless of screen size. What do you adjust? Answer: anchors. Explanation: setting the anchors to the bottom right corner ensures the button maintains its position relative to that corner. 3. Which render mode makes a UI element float in the 3D world, like a player's health bar? Answer: world space. Explanation: world space treats the canvas like a regular 3D object that can be moved, rotated, and positioned behind other objects. 4. What must you do to scene geometry before you can generate a NavMesh? Answer: mark it as navigation static. Explanation: the baking process ignores objects unless they are marked as navigation static, or static. 5. Which component allows an NPC, non-player character, to walk along the NavMesh? Answer: NavMesh agent. Explanation: the NavMesh agent component handles the pathfinding, movement, and avoidance logic for the character. 6. What is the parent object for all standard UI elements? Answer: canvas. Explanation: all UI elements, text, images, buttons, must be children of a canvas object to render. 7. You want to lower the volume of all sound effects at once without changing the music. What tool do you use? Answer: audio mixer. Explanation: an audio mixer allows you to route different audio sources into groups, like SFX and music, and control their volume globally. 8. What does the spatial blend slider on an audio source do? Answer: it blends between 2D, flat, and 3D, positional, sound. Explanation: if set to 3D, the sound gets quieter as you walk away. If 2D, it is equally loud everywhere, good for music. 9. In the navigation window, what does baking do? Answer: it calculates the walkable surfaces based on the scene geometry. Explanation: baking analyzes the static meshes and creates the blue navigation mesh that agents use to move. 10. What component handles button clicks and input for the UI? Answer: event system. Explanation: the event system component is automatically created with the canvas. It translates mouse clicks and touches into UI events. 11. You want to make a UI image clickable. What component do you add? Answer: button component. Explanation: adding a button component to an image allows it to respond to click events and trigger functions. 12. What defines the radius and height of the eye character for pathfinding? Answer: the settings in the NavMesh agent component. Explanation: the agent has properties for radius, height, and speed that determine where it can fit and how fast it moves. 13. A sound is playing, but you want it to loop, repeat, forever. What do you check? Answer: the loop checkbox on the audio source. Explanation: checking loop makes the audio clip start over immediately after it finishes, useful for background music. 14. What happens if you have two audio listeners in one scene? Answer: Unity will give a warning, error. Explanation: you should only have one active audio listener, usually the player's head, camera, to avoid confusion in sound output. 15. How do you ensure your UI scales correctly on mobile phones versus tablets? Answer: use the canvas scaler component. Explanation: the canvas scaler, set to scale with screen size, adjusts the size of UI elements based on the resolution of the device. Outro and call to action. Wow! You did it! We just went through the core concepts for the Unity Certified Associate exam. That was a lot of information, but you are doing great. If you found this helpful, please verify the link in the description. This was just a quick overview. I have a full practice course on Udemy that simulates the real exam environment. It is the best way to check if you are truly ready. And for my visual learners, the Etsy study guide has all these notes with colorful diagrams and cheat sheets that you can print out. You have the skills. Now go get that certification. I believe in you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Unity tutorials.